Hello, everyone. We are back with another episode of Poems, Prayers, and Promises, as promised. And we continue to hold this space every weekend, Saturday, 6 p.m. in the evening, where we can just collect in this solemn contemplation of the times that are going on. And while most of us have been trying to do things in our own ways to stay safe, to help others, to stay afloat, and yet there are so many others who are really doing so much more in terms of collecting resources for the rest of us, making sure we are protected, making sure that we are safe, we get the oxygen on time, we get the doctor's prescription on time. It is our humble offering at Lighthouse to try to hold a little space for us to come together, to just renew our emotional energy and to just tell each other that we are holding space for you, and we know that you are holding space for me, and we shall navigate this together. I cannot with confidence say that this will pass by and will be unscathed. We won't be. Truth be told, we are seeing the carnage all around us, and yet it perhaps also gives us a moment to reckon that if only we can manage the right language we are speaking inside our head, the language we are using to calm our hearts or to agitate our hearts because the anxiety and the panic are such, or the language we are using with people around us, people who are suffering, people who are scared, people who are reaching out to us, who we are reaching out to, people who are younger, people who don't understand it all, neither do we completely. Today, our topic of conversation and discussion is something that is a difficult one. I had a very long, hard, you know, doubt in my mind before I even thought of this, but I'm very confident that with Celia, who has been one of the most powerful yet most calm and peaceful person who I know will do justice to this topic and will give us something that we need at this moment, the language of love and the language of loss. The thing is that so far, and I hope many of you would perhaps also agree with me on that, we have tiptoed around the idea of loss and death. We have simply not known how to talk about it, how to express our fears, how to say that what happens to the child, how to say that what happens to uh, everything, what happens to the reality as we knew it, as it is shifting right in front of our eyes. And while this is not at all to say that we need to increase the apprehension, or we need to, we need to really describe something that is a horror scene, but at the same time, this current crisis, this current overwhelming desperate times, they have also brought us down on our emotional knees. We have colleagues who we now see as humans, who have gone through hell, who have been managing, caregiving, gone to the hospital, and we didn't hear from them for many days. We are seeing people who earlier appeared like slices of themselves, and now we are suddenly seeing them as 360-degree humans suffering at workplaces, at home, in the community, as neighbors. Our leaders do not know answers anymore. Our parents do not know answers anymore. Our children are looking at us with blank eyes, and we do not know how to talk to them and what to tell them, through fear, and unfortunately for some people through suffering, and even more drastic for some people who have suffered loss. As is customary, we have been doing these sessions for, I think, over a month now. Many of you who have followed the work we are doing at Poems, Prayers, and Promises, you would remember that we had first started off with the Tibetan bowl meditation, and then we spoke about the psychology of, the stages of grief, the Kubler-Ross model of the 7 stages of grief, and how we can navigate and how we can at least try to catch it with the right labels. which gives an analytic twist to this unfathomable emotion we are having, so that we don't go in cycles. We try to make sense of what is happening to us, and we also know that it's normal to be abnormal at this moment. We also had a session last week where we spoke about breathing and breathing for immunity, for increasing resilience, and how to expand the lung power, how to breathe to release the fear, how to breathe through isolation, how to breathe through the process of recovery, and how to breathe to release the pain that is almost a tangible physical manifestation of the loss that we are seeing around us. And we are stepping up with today's session, where we will be talking about the language of loss. We have so far tiptoed around with rest in peace and RIP, and I didn't know what to say. I heard about your thing, but I am not sure, what I can do. And we cannot be enough with that lack of language. We need language, we need words, we need to be able to process ourselves, our feelings, our heart, our head, and also to stand up for the others and to tell the right thing, but not be silent anymore, just fearing that we were not politically correct. And we need to be able to, as parents, talk to our little children. I will read out as I have been doing at each of these sessions. I'll read out a little two paragraphs from one of the poems that I came across through these times, trying to make sense of the reality myself. And I feel that that would really set the tone to the conversation that will follow it. When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. I'm just reading the last two paragraphs of The Great Tree Falls, The Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. Great souls die. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of the dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Slowly and always irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses, restored never to be the same, whispered to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. Celia, I welcome you to take over from this point and to give us the language we need today to navigate these times.
Okay, Tinjini, very profound words there. And the beginning of any time of pain and suffering, as your last speaker last week spoke on, as the breath, bringing us back to our center, is probably one of the most important things, and it's one of the greatest tools any of us have, is our breath. And bringing in and taking time to have our breath when all chaos is around us is possibly the only thing that we can do when our whole life crumbles around, when loved ones leave, family, relatives, whoever it may be, it causes a chaos in our mind. I think the biggest thing about death for anyone, and that massive loss, is the complete sense of powerlessness that just takes over the mind, and then the chaos that happens in the mind, where it just goes shooting off into so many directions, that brings your own personal pain even more, because you're not sure how to slow the mind down to center enough to start to even make decisions, to think clearly. And so, of course, the breath is one of the biggest tools as a parent you can bring to teaching your child to just taking a few deep breaths, thinking about 10 seconds, just following the breath in and out of the nose. And that can be enough to center them, their pain and suffering and confusion, to start to be able to have a conversation in the first place, to bring the center between a parent or a child, or even to a friend, to be able to sit quietly and calmly, following your own breath and being completely present in the space of a friend or a loved one that may be suffering some type of confusion. It doesn't always have to mean death. It's sickness, it's loss, it's a change of livelihood. Any of those things bring in types of mini death or loss and confusion and powerlessness. So I would really say, you know, the breath is one of those biggest things and the one tool we carry with us our whole entire life, and that is our own point of power. All the rest can be pulled out from under us, and then we have to start to find our foundations and put the roots back into the soil like the tree and stand firm. And that does take time, and time is something that no one can predict how it's going to be for another person, what their process is, what they're moving through. It's always uniquely different. One of the things that I would probably say to begin any conversation when you're dealing with the toughness of loss and not knowing what to say to a person, or one of the things I've found in counselling to not say, perhaps is the best way to go on, is to not say, I understand how you feel. It's a very natural thing we might want to say. And you can say, I can understand what you're going through, because if you've gone through something similar, you can say that, but we never know exactly how another person feels. Everyone's process, everyone's relationship with maybe someone who's died is never, ever the same. It's uniquely different. So for me, I find the powerful words to say is, I have no idea how you are managing, but I am here in whatever way you need me.
So
And
we
with
must never
those,
say that, I understand. And that is something that perhaps many of us are guilty of using, that, we often reach out and say that, I hear you and I understand. And that is definitely not the right thing, because we should instead say that, I have no idea what you are going through, but I'm here should you need me to do anything for you.
yes, or you can replace it too with I can hear you is a strong one, because it means you're indicating that you're listening, which is really powerful for the person suffering. They need a calm, kind, listening ear that just stays in that present moment with them and allows them to either cry, debrief, rant, have anger, whatever the true emotions that are coming out, to be able to hear and listen to it without any judgment and allow them to be their unique human self. When we start to say we understand what you're going through, if you've been through similar, you can say that. And then that person knows that you are on the same accord and you've been through the process. They may even ask you more questions. But when you say, I know exactly how you feel, that many times can have somebody who's in deep grief say things like, how can you possibly know how I feel? You're not inside me. And so it's stealing their feeling of unique truth in the moment, the power in the moment that they're going through. And of course, we're going to say those things every now and then. But as time goes on, the more you practice it, or even in a card, if you're writing a card to somebody, then having those words saying, I'm here for you, I'm here to listen to what you're going through, I'm here to help understand what you're going through, I think is a very powerful way of working through some of that. And I'm sure when later we get to discuss it with some of the other ladies and participants here, that they might add some of those extra words or the ways they've always appreciated somebody else approaching them. I think the kindness that comes in being present and listening overtakes all other words and all other actions. Just being prepared to stay and sit and listen, or offer the fact that you are there for them if they need you. Most people are very amazing, very resilient, and often like to process their pain and their grief privately. But to know that they've got a community of people that if they fall in a heap, they know that you have said you're willing to be there in that really difficult, sometimes we feel it's a very ugly journey because tears come, crying comes, different grief reactions come very unexpectedly. And so knowing that there are people who are walking by your side, taking one another by the hand and leading one another home. It's a very, very big story to say, to just sit there with your friend, your child, your colleague, a grandparent,
I
whatever.
wanted to ask you, Celia,
Yeah.
again, because you are very familiar with the Indian culture, and for all of you who are watching from inside the Zoom meeting that, you know, all of us are in together in the screen, and also for those of you who are watching on social media. You know, Celia has very strong Indian connections. She has been here. She has been part of a whole lot of cultural you know, inclusion, and she has been associated with a whole lot of projects, non-profit projects, etc. You know how the family structure and the cultural side of you know, grief and loss and death, and to be very specific, mortality loss, not a heartbreak, but really, you know, death of a person, to be very specific. You know, in India, of course, and especially with the, you know, more so in perhaps some of those older cultures, there is, of course, a whole ritual and practice of people actually physically going and just standing there, and to, you know, to imply, even though not in so many words, that we are here, give us, you know, pass us the task, we can do, you know, we can get you, like whatever, starting from simple things like a white sheet of cloth, to flowers, to incense sticks, to whatever it is, you know, whatever it is, you just, you know, take your car and rush by and do things. And right now the world looks very different. The rules of the game has totally shifted. Now we can only express through, unfortunately, and you know, in most cases, so words which are actually comments on social media posts, emoticons, emojis, really, you know, you know, love sign or a heart sign or a crying sign. There are just 5 or 7 usual Facebook emojis, and our departed souls and our entire association, our entire nostalgia, our entire overwhelming idea of that saying goodbye has come down to clicking a button of a yellow round something on Facebook. When in the other times we used silence in a more somber way, in a more solemn way, we just went and stood, and it implied that we are here, we are not here to speak but to listen. But now the language has shifted totally, and it's not easy to adjust to such a shift of language. We often do not know, we often write a, you know, capital RIP, or put a emoticon, or even the very fact that we know perhaps that person who has gone through the loss, who is of course the survivor, is perhaps reading those comments, but we do not know what is the reaction. We cannot gauge, because of course not all of us are replying, or, you know, it's a very you know, it's almost like speaking to a blank wall and understanding, guessing. It's really a blind leads blind kind of a game that's going on, and we don't have the language. We just don't know. We don't know if it is all right to WhatsApp. We don't know if it is all right to call. We don't know if it is all right to react on Facebook or not react on Facebook. And yet, before I pass it on with a question to you, I had read it somewhere, and it stuck to my heart. You know, it's very important to discuss what is the right thing to say, like you shared. You know, I understand is not the appropriate thing. but I feel far more inappropriate is the stoic silence. I mean, at times we are so afraid that, we might not say the right thing. Is that the right thing to say right now? That we just tiptoe. We just pretend, we just become an ostrich. We dig our head into the sand and, pretend that nobody is watching us. And the thing is that it's not that the eyes are on us, but as a collective, what do we do?
I think we're going to have to use more and more of the multimedia that we have, because you're right, an emoticon, it doesn't do it enough. We're human and we need that interconnection. And the deafening silence is so much harder for anyone to bear through this time than people making an effort. Now, not everyone wants to show the whole world their emotional input to a person by putting a public Facebook post. But they may just say, I have sent you a poem in private messenger, or something. I've sent you something special in private messenger. And it's there, I think you need to be able to start to, if you write something, you can go to any bookstore or card place and get a card, and you just write in, to and from, and send it. There's something really different about when it's you who writes the words, or you who reads some special words like you did tonight, Sinjini, to somebody with the video. I know not everyone's going to cope with video, but maybe if the connection is strong enough that they can get a family member to perhaps video them doing that, or handwriting something. I think in this most enormous time across the world, we have to start using this multimedia to still be human. Because if we start to create this massive gulf from being so beautifully human and standing right there to silence, it's going to change the nature of all the relationships, and you'll have a breakdown of community. Whereas your culture is so beautiful with the depth of community. I think it's far more connected than the Western world. We've become already more disconnected. So for you guys, you need to be able to find very unique things that says, it's come from my heart. I've made an effort. I've taken more than 1 minute to do a smiling emoticon or a sad one. It means you've taken 10 minutes out of your day to write the poem, to read it. Or even if you can't write or read, even if you've got flowers, you're handing in front of a screen, this is from me, I'm handing you the flowers, or whatever the culture is, showing that you're still participating like you normally would, and that your greatest wish would be that this craziness of lockdown was gone, and this is exactly what you would still be doing.
That's a very practical and a very, very useful tip. Thank you so much. Yes, that definitely, a small voice message and a small video message, I think, and it works. The thing is that I have personally also seen that when people are, incommunicado for a while, because of course either they are suffering or they're admitted, or they have gone through a huge loss, but maybe 7 days or 10 days later they have come back and they said that I listened to your message while I was in the ICU, and it does make a difference. So we of course understand communication to be two-way, and when we know that the person cannot reply, we often stop ourselves from making that one step, imagining that she cannot read it now, he cannot respond. But I feel that on behalf of those people who are actually isolated and they have more time in hand, even though they're suffering, and even if they cannot read, there is a chance they might read. It is perhaps worth our effort and time to just send a personalized, a little bit of something. I have been sending out small, of course this is not to say that I am doing it right, but I have got replies like 7-10 days later, and somebody who lost his father, he said that just the reference of those 7 stages, it helped me to put words against a very, because at the moment what is perhaps normal and what is happening all around us is denial and anger are the most visible. I do not know if those are the most felt feelings of the range of feelings of sadness and sorrow and loss, but at least in visible terms, because those are easier to express. A moment of sorrow when I'm recollecting, the memories and the nostalgia of somebody close to me is perhaps not as tangible, or I would not perhaps go out on social media to do it. But when it is anger and it's turning into a sense of, some kind of, so this hospital has done this, so tweet widely and say that, cancel their registration. So those are the things that people are also finding easier to respond to.
Yeah.
And I'll just cite an example that comes immediately to mind. So a friend who got her father admitted, and then she wrote that, I got my father admitted at 4 o'clock in the evening, and we have not heard from the hospital ever since. I'm trying, nobody's picking up the phone, they are not being able to tell anything about the patient, do not know the bed number, do not know the ward number, and all of that. And please guys, tweet widely. And somehow it spread like wildfire, like it would, people were trying to help. And after a while she writes back that, stop tweeting, they have handed over the body. And the stoic silence, we don't have the language to deal with the second piece of the news. It is so much easier for us to join in anger, join in frustration, or join in, in, I'm not saying that we should not blame. There are certainly, reasons to blame, but the thing is, the blame game isn't getting us anywhere at the moment.
No.
But it is so much easier for us to direct our energy. We have to remember that it is, if there are very little control left in our hand, it is perhaps this, that we choose where our energy goes. And perhaps we are spending a whole lot of energy in joining and lighting and flaming and fanning the fire of anger. But are we helping the people who do they need, that, or do they need something else? Or how can we reach with that softness vis-a-vis the social media, the obvious restrictions and the boxed way of communicating with very open, public, emoticon related, acronym related language of social media.
Yes. Look, the anger is natural. The biggest reason the anger comes is that lack of control and that powerlessness. So anger comes to replace it, to gain back that control. Because if they can blame somebody else, they can rant about something, it's them wanting somebody else to adjust their life, their behavior, to come in line with them, so they can start to feel as though they're bossing their universe again. And that's where anger is one of the very first and fastest human reactions that we all have, because of that sense of desperately needing to remain in control. It's a little bit of the human spirit issue we have, is sometimes getting out of control or feeling as though we can boss everything, when the biggest thing that's happened across the world now with the COVID situation is no one's feeling in control. Something else has hijacked that reality, and we're all shifting and changing our life cycles to deal with that. The anger actually doesn't help. It can sometimes, for a person, help them get strong enough to take action, to ring up, to get down the street. So anger helps propel us, sometimes in positive ways. When it's a negative way and it just is ranting for no sake, not going anywhere, it's not helping the person who's under sufferance. So other people jumping in on that anger, it just becomes almost like a mind pollutant. It just jams up even more of the ability for the person who's suffering the most, who is angry and still processing their layers of grief. It's not helping them find more of that calm equilibrium. So reinforcing ways and gentler ways of speaking to direct the mind of the person having the strong anger back to some practical, gentle processes, or just even stating, you sound really agitated and angry. That must be really hard. That can help the person who's really losing it at the moment to go, oh, yes, I am really angry, and it is really hard. And that starts to help them read their own emotions and their own reactions, especially out in the social media, because we can never take back what we've put out in social media. So we need to help our loved ones who may have a collapse to not make it so public, to be able to process it a little more privately, and encourage them to find their balance of their mind again, because that's really what happens, is they lose the balance of their mind through tragedy and trauma and not feeling in control. It's a tough one.
I want to, of course, ask two big questions. So maybe one after the other, but before I forget, one is, of course, how to parent in these times. How to sit with open questions, which we have created such larger than life pictures of ourselves in front of our little children, that mom has all the answers, dad has all the answers, and we don't. And it is also an opportunity, and I would like to quote one of our previous sessions on poems, prayers, and promises, where Dr. Kumar, who was our guest that day, she had said that, so I was asking her that maybe there's something to learn from these times for all of us, and do you think that we as human race will be shifted in terms of our consciousness and conscience and the way we work and the way we feel, being more human? And she was very practical in that reply, that she said that, I don't know how much it will work for us, but I know that the younger generation, they'll be changed and transformed for life. And while that is going to be an automatic outcome of the process, but how they perceive it at the moment depends so much on us, because they are not meeting their friends, they are not absorbing things from their teachers, and most of us parents are also conscious enough to not let the news reel run in front of their eyes with all the very very gory pictures. So essentially they are consuming the news or the interpretation through our lens, through our mouth, through our eyes. And how we tell them what is going on, what is happening, I cannot but refer to the film, if any of you have watched that, Life is Beautiful, where it is a film about, the concentration camp and the father and the little son, Joshua. And the father keeps the narrative of this being a game and everybody is competing very hard. It's a very serious game. And by the end of it, if Joshua and the father wins, they'll get something. And what is that? A tanker. Even the father is shot dead in the process, but by the end of it, when Joshua sees a tanker, he believes that he has won it because he has survived, he has been a good boy, he has been a good player. I mean, that is just an example, but these times do remind us over and over again of the concentration camp. We practically cannot breathe, we practically don't have oxygen. People are saying that, people are actually sending out video recording of minutes before they have moved on, saying that right now I cannot breathe. We are, as adults, relentlessly absorbing it. I do not know what is the right advice, to stop looking at them or to look at them and grow empathy and run out and rush out and help people. I do not know the right answer. It all depends on what capacity, emotional capacity we hold, how much we can process, wear your own seatbelt first. But my question still remains, how do we parent and what do we pass on to them?
Well, the first thing is the anger doesn't help. So when the children see the anger response of adults all around them responding that way, you're teaching them that when they grow and as their psychology keeps developing, that they think that anger is the solution. So already you can change their response around any difficult situation by not presenting anger. The telling the truth, I think, is one of the biggest things. It's not always easy when you're the parent and you, as you said, Sinjini, you often put yourself up as the authority and they're looking up to you to have all the answers. The truth is we don't. And the more our children know we don't, it actually engages their own critical thinking, and it even engages their feeling that they want to help you and they have an amazing innate intelligence, and they have an amazing innate sense of kindness and givingness, that if they're not seeing somebody else having the ultimate authority, it actually allows them to bring more and more of that forward. And they can actually be our teachers in many ways. So by asking them, when they ask you those big questions about what is death, what is losing the breath, what are all some of the cycles of it, then I think it's always age appropriate how you answer. So the best way, and in counseling they talk about, you ask the child, what do they think happens when a person dies? What do they think when a person is sick or is in hospital? What would they do to help that situation? Because they come up with some amazing solutions, but by listening to them, it helps you as the parent gauge how much information you disclose about the process, and whether you need to still remain very simple language, because the age of the child is different. Some children are more mature and have a very fascinating concepts, and you can then be guided to add a little more to those words, and then take the questions on higher and higher. Also, what you do is, if you ask them what would they do, what would they want to do, what do they feel in their heart they want to do, you're giving them a point of empowerment and permission to come up with a solution. So a child might say, I just want to draw a picture and send it to them. And you go, okay, that sounds beautiful. That gives the child permission. They feel like they're doing something beautiful, a kindness. So allow them to do it and engage with them. If they can't send it by post or anything physical, then you make sure you take the photo of it and put it up on the messenger so that the person they want to send that message to gets it. And by doing those positive actions, it's always, when you do positive kindness and from a point of truth, even if the other person doesn't respond for a long time, the energy goes there, the intention goes, and it will come. You'll start to recognize that the impact, like you did, Sinjini, the impact comes back days later. And I think if we hold back from that true beauty of who we are, then we're actually robbing all of our community of the essence and power of what we have. Now, it's very easy for us, especially as adults, we start to wind up ourselves with stories that when a person doesn't respond, that, oh my gosh, they're thinking I'm negative, they're making a terrible opinion about I wrote the wrong words. It's the story in our head that can infect us and stop us from taking the next step of kindness. And we have to understand that whatever another person's going through, it's their story. And it's not our story to be life changed by them responding when they're in a time of need or distress. We just have to patiently wait. And if they return a comment later of great thanks and gratitude that they saw what you did and what a child might do, then we just have to trust that the world is going to bring that process in. We can't forgive ourselves for just doing the best, or we can certainly ask forgiveness by doing the very best from the right action, the right integrity. If sometimes a person misinterprets it, we can't control that either. So I'm not sure if I fully answered that, but certainly with our children, the anger response breeds more anger and confusion for their later life in responding, and giving them the powerful tools, even if it's to many children sometimes may need to sit down quietly instead of face to face with you, and they're looking straight at you, which can make you feel really awkward and just not knowing what. It might be to go, well, we'll talk about it over some cooking, or we'll talk about this over doing an activity. Little boys especially are not so great straight face to face. They're better if they're doing an activity. So when they're playing their cars or whatever, they can usually just talk while they're not looking in your eyes, and you might find that you get a much deeper conversation with them.
That's a very Good insight. Yes. And this reminds me why, I had read a study that, couples speak so much more when they're driving a car down, because they're not eye to eye. And also channeling the energy or giving another outlet, like, so I'm moving the so I'm cooking or I'm baking something, so that gives us an excuse for silence than actually sitting down face to face and holding each other hostage in a conversation, to engage in something and have a more casual conversation. Or even, even as we are watching a whole lot of movies, etc., because that is what we are doing really, even though there is this overwhelming
Mm,
huge thing sitting on our shoulders and consciousness, but at the same time we have also got a whole lot of free time and we need distraction, and we are doing that. And most of the story arcs, most of the fictional films we are watching are definitely, there is a story arc which talks about some kind of crisis and some kind of sadness, some kind of loss. And that, I have realized, gives a good entry point for us parents to start a conversation. What do you think? Without even
yeah.
putting a pause on the remote, it is simply like, what do you think about that?
Mhm.
So that perhaps preps a little bit without having to sit down and pin down a conversation which we are not comfortable with.
Yeah. And in the end, there will be times where the child will ask. And I think there's an appropriate time to be able to just go, well, what actually happens when you die is, a person finishes their breathing and then something changes with the body and then the body doesn't move anymore. And then depending on your belief systems, then you will decide as the parent how much further you want to take that dialogue about whether the spirit moves on into another dimension and leaves the body, that sometimes the spirit might visit, because there's many cultures that have their different stories of after death, whether the spirit moves on and comes into another life one day, sometime much later after their process life. Other people will just feel that in many indigenous cultures, I'll just talk about the person's spirit becomes part of the land, and then the land has such health and vibrancy. So, you know, helping the child, and then when you start to add that information, then asking them what do they think, or have they seen something like that, then they will usually relate it to either a TV show, a pet that has died, other stories that children are having at school. That's the other thing is, what are the other children saying? They're not going to school in India by the sounds of it at the moment, but certainly they may have some online. So you also need to talk about, well, what are the other kids saying to your children? So you can help adjust that they're coming from a point of factual truth, the biology of the process, and the biology, a little bit of the sickness without going into too frightening. But the fact is, with death, we're all going to face it at some point, just like we face birth. The beauty of birth and the taking in that first breath and giving us life, we're all going to move through that process. We'll either move through it ourselves personally, but we'll certainly see it in our lifetime. So the biggest tool we can give our children is the naturalness of that, and helping them understand that, yes, people do get incredibly sad missing that person and missing their interaction with us and the love that comes from it. I think there was something you said with the poem as well, is just that what a person leaves behind in all the others that ever got to interact with them becomes the most powerful message. And I think even children being talked to like that is about, well, tell me the positive things that person impacted on you. And then they can start to speak about positive things, which then changes how their mind is focusing on it. And that can give them the uplift aspect.
You said it, Celia. In fact, when I said, when I was speaking the last time, I said that I have two big questions for you. And while I spoke about parenting, and you kept, saying very, very rightly that, not to give them too much information, that is exactly where my second question lay, which is that we don't have information. What happens? it may sound like, an intellectual departure at the moment, with so much of reality pressing us down. This discussion ought to go in the direction of, what happens and what are our interpretation, may sound a little, I don't know, if that sounds insensitive. But I also feel that our anger, our entire response to this entire incident is under certain, assumptions, entitlements, presumptions, which we had thought of to be true, like, humans, given the basic resources, and unless something big happens, we live a full biological life of a certain number of years, and that has been our, we had assumed that to be the absolute truth, and we had assumed that to be the, expectation, entitlement, and that is getting challenged, and that is breaking down right in front of our eyes, and we are not ready to be robbed of that entitlement. But beyond the number of years, and beyond the, the readiness to accept that, of course, at times we say that, yes, she was suffering a lot, he was suffering a lot, it is a happy departure, of course we shed a few drops of tears, but we move on in life, the children have settled down, there are grandchildren, and there's this entire, readiness that is largely dependent on age, and also the circumstances, in illnesses, how long they have suffered, what they had to give back, what they were doing already. And of course there's this very, very different situation of somebody who is at the center of life, who is just about, so our very assumption about the life cycle and expectations, life expectation, it sounds like a very actuarial term. I'm an actuary, but I think our life expectation has a philosophical dimension at this moment. At this point,
look.
Yeah, sorry, so I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask you this, this thing, because in one of our previous discussion also this came by, that, somebody lost somebody, and then the next feeling is that, visitations, which are of course perhaps subconscious, I mean, we do not know the bigger truth, we are agnostic, most of us, but the visitations led to horror. The same person who we loved so much, now we are afraid, because we have been grown up and conditioned on the stories of the supernatural, and that's such a pity. And how can we shift? Of course there will be the immediacy of the loss, there is no doubt about it, but how can we remind ourselves and others of the entire length of love and nurturing, and the very, very phenomenon of that person being there? So we are so sad because they left, because they were, and that is exactly what the poem also was about, that because they were, be happy that they were, kind of a interpretation. It's not easy, and I'm not saying that it should be the only way. And there should be time and patience for loss and grief, and we should not try to deny that or suppress that. But what do you think about the narrative that we allow ourselves? I mean, do we get absorbed with the immediacy? Do we allow ourselves to, go behind or go futuristic in terms of accepting it as a natural process of life and death?
Oh, there's lots of angles there that you've covered, Sanjini. I'd love to just go back to the very first reference that you talked about. That's the idea of people dying much younger. They're not going through their full life cycle. I mean, everywhere on the planet, people have been dying early, not at their full life cycle. It's always much harder when you're seeing it happen en masse, which you're seeing. And what we're seeing is more like a wartime situation. And many other generations through every country's cultural history, there have been generations of people affected by war and loss. And yet they've survived, and they've come out stronger with new economies, with new social and cultural attitudes. And so that is a way that we can talk and encourage children that we don't know what's happening. This is new to us. We're all struggling. We're working on learning how to manage with one another, with our families, with our society. It will change us, all of us, because everything has to shift to learn to understand this new situation. But the encouraging that there have been in the past, in your culture, my culture, these similar sorts of situations of a lot of mass death, change family units, economical ramifications, that the human spirit is strong and is very inventive and starts to shift and change. So bringing it again about the positive, that we've done it before, we will move through it. It's not going to be easy, but bit by bit, the human spirit will push through. Can certainly help bring it, and that might even be then that a child or another person, you start to speak a little bit about that historical side. And I'd had written one point on a positive note, because I think we really do need to see the positive angle of this tragedy that we're all facing, and that is, in wartime, in the Western world, women suddenly found their voice. They were given equality in many ways after the war, because all the men were gone and they had to step in. So, of course, in the COVID situation, as family structures change a lot, this may be another way of women stepping in more and more strongly, taking up that mantle of the family and bringing in more inventiveness. Because as you know, us women are pretty inventive and very strong in being able to change the society around us. Now, when it comes to having to face the suddenness of end of life, we all have to ask the question, what does that mean? How do we live a life and have it cut short? And how do we progress on, and what does that mean to us as a spiritual being? Because in every level and every layer of society at the moment, there is mini deaths. It's mini death of livelihood. It's mini death of, are you a wife or a husband, are a widow or a widower, a child who's lost a parent, grandparents. Every level is being challenged, and the human spirit is having to drop all of that. You were none of that when you took breath, when you were born. You were a child, but that's all you were. You were breath and spirit that came into a body, and then over a lifetime you've accumulated all these labels. What is happening is a spiritual transformation, in my opinion, because as you know, I work on the spiritual level in many things. The spiritual transformation is about equalizing all humans to say, you're amazing, you can do all these amazing things in life. Yet, when it comes to not being the worker, not having the fancy job, not being the parent, not being the wife, who are you really? You're definitely breath. So that becomes the one core anchor point that you have. And so I see that it's an absolute spiritual shift in all humanity that you're going through, and we're all going through. And I witness through with everybody around me this big question: if we're not these labels, then who are we really, and what are we pushing ourselves to do? What are we trying to prove? Now, of course, only the individual can answer that to themselves by doing that inquiry. That's not for somebody else to try and take on and tell them who you are really. That's a very personal journey. Now, when we come into the idea of being a spirit in a body, and one day we may not be a spirit in a body anymore, because this spirit, which I believe is eternal and moves and experiences many dimensions, travels then in another way and expresses in another way, then many people may have the experience of connecting somehow to the energy or the essence or a visual apparition of the person that they love turning up in dreams or physically. Now, how a person receives that, the best way to explain, to first ask them, even if they had fear afterwards, what was their very first feeling? Because usually the very first feeling is the truth. Oh, there they are, they're smiling, they look healthy, oh, thank goodness they're still alive. They're alive, maybe not in the physical body, but they've shown their spirit body as being healthy. The secondary emotional response will usually be a cultural media generated response to be fearful of something that is not physical anymore, and believe that you have to be scared of the apparition or the visiting of a loved one. And so it's a tricky thing again, because each parent, each family has their own religious idea, spiritual idea as to how you want to bring your children up and give a sense of what you believe is your own truth and participating in that. But certainly asking what was that very first emotional response gives a strongest truth to the moment that's just been exchanged. And then as a parent, it'll be up to you to say, well, you know, did grandma look happy? Did she look healthy? You know, did she look like she's having a good time? Oh, that's a very nice picture she's given you. And just ask those questions.
Thank you. I think that was a very good, insightful, and very supportive answer. And while we pass on our beliefs, we say that we try to parent unbiasedly, but we inevitably pass on our beliefs. But at least we can be, you know, watchful of the beliefs that don't help us at the moment for our emotional navigation. I mean, just really watch what we pass on in terms of what happens when a loved one goes. They still love us. At least, you know, that is a change that perhaps doesn't hurt any of our religious sentiment, and that is a change we need to make for the sake of our children at the least, if not anything else. I also wanted to, you know, bring about another question, which again very organically came out from your answer right now with the family structure. One thing is, of course, to go through that process of having suffered a loss and then trying to navigate emotionally. And while that is happening to a large number of people, but of course not to everyone, and, you know, touch wood and grateful for that, but the fear is everywhere. The fear is in everyone. And it is not just a general fear about, you know, what will happen, etc. It is also about apprehension and prediction and what happens to the child. I think one of the biggest questions about young parents at the moment, because we have also been seeing, you know, text messages traveling where they're saying that, you know, two children up for adoption, and then quickly people are responding with saying that this is not the proper channel, it can lead to trafficking, etc. But as parents, many of us know, in fact, just last evening when, you know, at the program I'm teaching, in the batch we were talking about our personal narrative stories and how we are navigating this time, and another parent said exactly this thing, that last message you know she read before she went to sleep that day is really that, and the age is the same as your own child, and you know you just feel it like almost it's like a palpable, like it's a punch in the gut that a child just like your child suddenly has a shift on the family structure, so much so that she's trying to find a new home.
Yeah.
What is the process is this, you know, is the more statutory question, but the very reality punches you in the gut. And this is of course happening to a few, but is the fear is traveling to every other mind. And along with that, also the other thing is the financial structure. The thing is, of course, we have planned our life under a certain assumption, certain sense of, you know, earnings, etc., etc. And because culturally we do not speak of death, we do not even talk about, you know, where we have kept our papers, what happens, like what is the process, where is, you know, if there is insurance or not. I mean, it's very natural, and it's very, like, you know, we have all, especially I'm speaking on behalf of India here, because a large part of, you know, the culture is really that the parents, when they go, they leave, you know, inheritance for the children. And really with so many very, you know, well timed, like, you know, above 80, above 90 age, moving on, it is often with the family to find out, you know, oh, okay, so there was insurance, oh, okay, so we have to apply, because these conversations are not normalized at all. Forget about the, you know, current bank account. It is about, something that somebody would have purchased 20 years back and kept in the corner of, some document somewhere. So that process I have personally seen, and I'm sure many of us have seen that, when somebody, an old man who was the earning member of the family has passed away, and for the wife and the children, there are so many years of, you know going to the post office, going to the bank, going to the insurance company, applying for pension, waiting for the approval, making the calls, red tapeism. So far it was few and scattered, and we lived with it, we never spoke about it. But now, with the widespread thing, I think, this conversation also is something that we are not letting ourselves have, not having, cannot stop the self-talk. How do we navigate that?
Wow, we should be navigating it daily. Even before all this COVID, this should have been something that people start to have a reality check. Maybe I'm just a real realist, but the mess that we can leave behind when we die and the confusion that we do for loved ones, it's actually an act of total compassion to begin that conversation. And I know it's not comfortable because many people don't talk about it because they've got an absolute terror of death. And they also can have a superstition that if they talk about death, it might bring it on sooner and faster. So that's a tough one. And what you're saying, Sanjini, I have just traveled from one state to another. On my very first day of arrival, my really lovely girlfriend's mother died. She wasn't so close to her, but I got to go into the mother's home with my friend, and there was just chaos. They cannot find any papers to know how the lady would like to be buried or do any of her organisations, no paperwork, nothing can they find. And it's because the mother didn't sort of make that conversation. For me, I knew when my mum was sick that time was going to get shorter. So as a daughter, every time I visited, I would just quietly look around because mum didn't want to talk about it either. Was just when I could see which bank does she bank with, I would write it in my notes. What electricity company does she use? Has she got a mobile phone account? Because all those things, when a person dies, also adds a massive stress at the end. You just have to have a ticking list. So things like the insurance, asking those questions little bit by little bit, not all at once, can help. Unfortunately, there is a situation now for all of you to perhaps make those conversations. If you're not having to visit that now, it is an area where you bring it up with your children to be able to talk a little bit about, I would really love this kind of music, or this is my favorite type of thing, or I really love these photos, depending on how you do your funeral process. The one thing that's really interesting, that by the time a child is 8, so we're going to talk about the development of the child, many parents find that their child at 8 goes to a massive level of anxiety, and no one knows why. They don't understand what the anxiety is. I had one son that went through a little bit of anxiety, and it was really, he actually asked the question to me to help me be alert of it, and that was to say, what would happen to me if you died? So a child naturally starts to think about death of a parent, because from ages 1 to 7, the child just takes everything for granted that you'll always be there. But from 7, coming into the 8th year, the individual mind develops and they start to become more reflective. And that reflective mind goes, oh, actually, I'm quite reliant on these people I love. They feed me, they clothe me, they help me. And then when they have a thought and see and hear other people that have had a parent that die, a weird anxiety begins. We were able to tell him who we had arranged to be what we call the guardians, so the people who would take them to their home. He was fine. My second son went, just by 8, he just went crazy. He did what a little 1-year-old would do, and that was have separation anxiety. He kept having dreams about us both dying and didn't know what would happen to him. And he had this real anxiety, terror that we couldn't leave us out of our sight. So naturally, children in their development have this thing about what happens if we're not here. So we really need to be able to help our children through that most difficult time already by saying, well, actually, auntie or uncle or grandma, we have them organised. They're your family. They're who love you and they know you and understand you. They would be the ones that you would go to. So now you've just got a much more accelerated situation and it is pressing stronger. It doesn't mean that you're all going to die. It doesn't mean everyone's going to get sick. It's just, it will feel a bit like that if you bring the conversation up right in the middle of it. I think for all of you and for any of us as a parent, it helps us to feel better that we've voiced it and already started to put some organisation down, because we could easily have a different type of sickness or a different kind of accident that had nothing to do with the pandemic, and these same questions would have to be faced. I think as a society, we really owe it in a total kindness and compassion to those children that we have and the family, is to let one another know some of our plans and preferred ways of being and some of our business activities. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that did make a lot of sense. This session has been seriously, I didn't know how more than an hour passed, and also the subject was such, it is because it was Celia that I knew that this topic will be done justice to. And for all of you who have been following, that I try to put this as a space of a soothing conversation, soothing contemplation, to bring in meditation, ringing bowl meditation, to bring calm and peace. And it was a conflicted decision that, is this a good decision to have, good discussion to have? And I did feel that this feels a little bit like tough love, but this still is something that is urgent, perhaps more urgent than giving or holding a space or holding a fort of 1 hour of peace. And I mean, each of those things have their own place, but this tough love in terms of this communication, I felt was an urgent communication. I was having it inside my head, and I felt that many other people have been having it inside their heads. And one thing, if I have learned through my process, my journey, and my work with Lighthouse, is that when you feel something and others are also feeling something, be the first human werewolf to stand up and speak the truth. And soon, at least there's somebody out there who needs to listen to it and say that somebody else also feels this way, or asks this question, or has these fears. And all we have got now is to know that we are not the only one in it. That's perhaps a very big one. We are alienated, but we are all united in our fear. And also we are standing up so much more for each other, because we have realized that nothing can save us other than just, power of the community to help us. Yeah. Every question we asked, every question we answered really came down to an assumption of human compassion and support, and knowing that, it will be all taken care of. And somehow, be it children, be it money, be it oxygen cylinder, or be it the loved ones moving on, I mean, there is still a safety, emotional safety net of some sort that will cause us the tough love, but that would still, it won't help not to talk about it. And to talk about it is to pin down the fear, and then the fear deflates and maybe becomes a little smaller in size. So that was really the intention. Celia, the session cannot of course go away without your music. And tell us something that we can find some positive or some shift of energy in.
Okay, I've chosen a song that's easy to listen to, and it's really a bit of a religious song, I suppose. It's really speaking about waiting patiently for God, or God to intervene and to help and support, and that terrible waiting and being able to be pulled up out of some of those darker places. And the song is just sort of saying, like, how long are we going to sing this song? So in respect to the pandemic situation, it's like we're beseeching God, like, how long are we going to keep singing this song before it changes? And then there is a verse of just, that, bit by bit, the feet are stepping on the rock and getting stronger and firm. So I just thought I would just share this one with you and hope that it just feels nice in the body for anyone else who's still listening for that. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined and heard my cry. He brought me up out of the pit, out of the mire and clay. I will sing a new song. I will sing a new song. How long sing this song? How long sing this song? How long to sing this song? Sing this song. He set my feet upon a rock and made my footsteps firm. Many will see and hear. I will sing this song. I will sing a new song. How long sing this song? How long sing this song? How long, how long, how long, how long to change this song? To change this song. How long we can change this song? We can, we will, through kindness and the human will. How long to change this song?
You sing so beautifully, Celia, and I think we all reckon with the words. We hope we don't sing this song for too long anymore, and we really hope as a collective that we sing better songs. Thank you so very much for all of us who are in the meeting now. I just wanted to tell you that stay on. We will go off the Facebook Live and then we can ask Celia questions. I just wanted to have the more intimate, more personal, more direct questions in a more emotionally safe space without being live broad streamed on social media. So for all of us who are watching the session on social media, thank you so very much for watching. Here is thanks to Celia on behalf of each one of you, because I know that each one of you have benefited from what she shared, what she introspected on, the insights, the thoughtfulness, and of course the music. So thank you, Celia, on behalf of everybody who is going to watch later on. The recording will stay on social media, and I feel that this was, again, a tough love, but an important conversation to have.